I came home from my trip and found all my belongings in boxes. The taxi driver had just pulled away, leaving me at the end of the familiar driveway in the late afternoon sun. I stood there, a 65-year-old widow, returning from a quiet 10-day vacation in Florida, staring at my life neatly stacked against the garage door. There were 8 large moving boxes, 2 plastic bins, and a garment bag draped over a lawn chair. Taped to the top box was a piece of notebook paper. The handwriting belonged to my daughter Sarah. It read, "Sorry, Mom. No space for you anymore." I read the words twice. I didn't drop my suitcase. I didn't fall to my knees on the concrete, and I certainly didn't knock on the front door to demand an explanation. After living in that house for 2 years, taking care of my granddaughter and paying for their groceries, I knew exactly what was behind that door: excuses. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the warm breeze against my face. Then I walked over to the boxes. They were taped haphazardly, the work of someone rushing to finish an unpleasant chore. I opened the trunk of my car, which I had parked on the street before my trip, and began loading them in. The boxes were heavy, filled with my books, my winter coats, and the few framed photos I had brought with me when I sold my own home. My back ached by the 4th box, but I didn't stop. I worked systematically fitting the plastic bins into the back seat, making sure the garment bag was laid flat. Through the front window, the living room curtains twitched. Somebody was home. Probably Greg, my son-in-law. I didn't look up. I didn't wave. I simply closed my trunk, got into the driver's seat, and started the engine. I put the car in drive and pulled away from the curb. I was heading to an address my daughter had never heard of, a place I had prepared for a day just like this. Driving away from Sarah's house felt entirely different than I had ever imagined it would. For the first few miles, the only sound was the hum of the tires on the asphalt and the slight shifting of boxes in the back seat. 2 years ago, when my husband passed away, Sarah and Greg had offered me the guest room. I was grieving, and the idea of being near family seemed comforting. In exchange, I handed over a large portion of my savings to help them build a new deck and remodel their kitchen. I also took over the utility bills and became the default babysitter. At first, it was fine, but boundaries slowly eroded. Greg began treating my room like a storage closet, moving his golf clubs and winter tires into my closet. Sarah started planning evening outings without asking if I was available to watch my granddaughter, just assuming I would be there. Whenever I mentioned feeling crowded, Greg would sigh heavily and Sarah would change the subject. I realized I was becoming a guest who overstayed her welcome, yet one they expected to keep paying the entrance fee. I turned onto Oakwood Avenue, leaving their neighborhood far behind. My phone buzzed in my purse on the passenger seat. The screen lit up with Sarah's name. I didn't reach for it. I let it buzz until it went silent. I wasn't acting out of anger, but out of clarity. I had spent the last 20 years of my life smoothing over rough edges for everyone else. I was done being the shock absorber for my daughter's chaotic life and my son-in-law's subtle disrespect. As I approached the older, quieter side of town, the tension in my shoulders began to loosen. I pulled into a modest brick apartment complex lined with mature maple trees. I parked in spot number 42, turned off the engine, and looked up at the second-floor window. The blinds were drawn just the way I had left them. It was time to go inside. I pulled a brass key from my purse, climbed the wooden stairs, and unlocked the door to Unit 2B. The apartment was small, just a living room, a galley kitchen, and 1 bedroom. It smelled slightly of fresh paint and lemon cleaner. There was a comfortable beige sofa, a small dining table, and a bookshelf I had assembled myself. It wasn't luxurious, but it was entirely mine. About 8 months ago, Greg made a passive-aggressive comment about how much hot water I used. The next day, Sarah complained that my knitting basket in the living room ruined her aesthetic. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply went for a walk, found a local property management office, and signed a 1-year lease on this apartment using the remainder of my house sale funds, the money I had quietly kept in a separate account. Over the past few months, I had been moving in slowly. A few sweaters here, a favorite mug there. I bought basic furniture from thrift stores and had it delivered while Sarah and Greg were at work. I knew the day would come when they would decide I was too much of an inconvenience. I just didn't expect to find my things on the driveway after a vacation. I carried the first box up the stairs and set it on the living room floor. I spent the next 2 hours unloading the car. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, my back was stiff, but my space was organized. I walked into the kitchen, filled a kettle with water, and set it on the stove. I didn't have to worry if the whistle would wake Greg from his nap. I didn't have to wipe down the counters after someone else's mess. My phone vibrated on the counter, another message from Sarah. I picked it up and tapped the screen to read it, taking a sip of the hot tea I had just poured. The text message from Sarah sat on my screen, bright and demanding. "Mom, where are you? You didn't even knock. Greg needs the guest room for his new home office equipment. We were going to put a bed in the basement for you. Call me back right now." I set the phone face down on the kitchen counter. The basement. An unfinished, drafty space with concrete floors and a water heater that clanked loudly in the middle of the night. That was their solution for the woman paying their electric bill. I didn't type a reply. Explaining myself would only invite an argument, and arguments require energy I preferred to spend elsewhere. I finished my tea, washed the mug, and placed it in the dish rack. Then I took a warm shower, climbed into my own bed, and slept more soundly than I had in 2 years. The next morning, I woke up at 7. The apartment was perfectly quiet. I brewed a pot of coffee and sat at my small dining table, opening my laptop. Before my trip, I had been paying their utility bills directly from my checking account. I also shared a phone plan with them, and Greg had an authorized user card linked to my credit account, supposedly just for emergencies and household groceries. I had noticed those emergencies increasingly looked like golf green fees and takeout lunches. I logged into my banking portal. The screen loaded, showing the healthy balance I had carefully protected. I clicked on the auto-pay settings. Water bill canceled. Electric bill canceled. Internet canceled. I navigated to the credit card tab. I selected Greg's name, clicked on the options menu, and selected Remove Authorized User. A prompt asked if I was sure. I clicked yes. The system confirmed the card was now deactivated. I closed the laptop, took a sip of my coffee, and looked out the window at the morning traffic. The real test was about to begin. By noon, I was at the grocery store taking my time in the produce aisle. I selected fresh tomatoes and a bundle of basil, enjoying the simple act of buying food only for myself. My phone started ringing while I was at the checkout lane. It was Sarah again. I let it go to voicemail, paid for my groceries, and walked to my car. As I was loading the bags into the trunk, the phone rang a second time, then a third. When I finally got behind the wheel, I pressed a button to listen to the voicemails. The first was frantic. "Mom, Greg is at the gas station and the credit card was declined. Did you freeze the account because you're mad about the boxes? That is so immature. Unfreeze it. He needs to get to work." The second voicemail was louder, laced with genuine panic. "Mom, I just checked our mail and got a notice from the electric company about a returned auto pay. What are you doing? Call me." I deleted the voicemails. I didn't feel a surge of triumph, just a quiet sense of finality. They had assumed my resources were an unconditional feature of their lives, much like the sun rising or the mail being delivered. They wanted the space I occupied, but they wanted the money I provided to stay right where it was. I drove back to my apartment and unpacked my groceries. I organized my small pantry, placing a row of canned soups on the top shelf. I decided to bake a small loaf of banana bread. While the bread was in the oven, filling the apartment with a warm, sweet scent, I sat on my sofa with a book. I knew Sarah would keep calling. She was accustomed to me folding at the first sign of her distress. I turned a page in my book, ignoring the phone vibrating against the coffee table. Tomorrow, I would answer. The next morning, I finally picked up the phone on the second ring. "Where are you?" Sarah demanded immediately, her voice sharp and breathless. No greeting, no asking how my trip to Florida was. "I'm in my own home, Sarah," I replied calmly, looking at the sunlight streaming through my living room window. Your home is here. Or, well, it was. You know what I mean?" She stammered, catching her own contradiction. "Mom, you can't just disappear and cut off the credit card." Greg was humiliated at the pump yesterday. "Greg is 40 years old," I stated, keeping my tone perfectly level. "He can pay for his own gas. That card is in my name, and I no longer have a use for an authorized user." "You're doing this to punish us because of the boxes," she accused, her voice rising. "We needed the space, Mom. The basement is fine. You're overreacting." "I'm not reacting at all," I told her. "You left a note saying there was no space for me. I agreed with you. I packed my things and left. There is no argument here. But the electric bill, the internet. Those are bills for a house I do not live in," I answered simply. There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, trying to find a way to manipulate the conversation back into her favor. She was searching for the usual guilt triggers, the buttons she had pressed since she was a teenager. "Mom, you can't just do this to us," she finally whispered, playing the victim. "We rely on that money." "You relied on me," I corrected her gently but firmly. "But you treated me like a burden." "You have your space now, Sarah. Enjoy it. Give me your address," she demanded, the vulnerability vanishing instantly. "Greg is going to come over and we are going to sort this out." I took a breath. "No, excuse me." Sarah snapped, the shock evident in her voice. "I am not giving you my address," I repeated calmly. "I don't want Greg showing up at my door, and I don't want to have a meeting about this. Everything is already sorted out. You're my mother. You can't just hide from me." "I'm not hiding. I'm simply living my life. I'll speak to you when you are ready to be respectful, but I will not be bullied. And I will not fund a household that leaves my belongings on a driveway." I ended the call before she could shout another demand. I set the phone down and walked into my kitchen to make a salad. My hands were shaking slightly, an old reflex from years of avoiding conflict, but my chest felt incredibly light. 2 hours later, my phone rang again. It was Martha, a friend I had known for 30 years. "Valerie," Martha began, sounding amused. "Your daughter is currently standing on my front porch. She thinks you're hiding in my spare bedroom." I chuckled, leaning against my kitchen counter. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you weren't here. And even if you were, I wouldn't let her in, because she looked like a hurricane looking for a trailer park," Martha replied. "She was demanding to know where you moved. I told her I had no idea, which is technically a lie, but a righteous one." "Thank you, Martha. I'm sorry she dragged you into this. Don't apologize. It's about time you put your foot down." She drove off, looking frantic. I knew why Sarah was frantic. It wasn't about missing her mother. It was a Thursday. Greg usually went to his recreational basketball league on Thursday nights, which meant Sarah relied on me to watch my granddaughter Lily. Without me there, and without the extra funds in their checking account, the reality of their lifestyle was collapsing in on them. Then a text popped up on my screen from Sarah. It was the ultimate card she had left to play. I opened the text from Sarah. "If you want to act like a child and abandon your family, fine. But don't expect to see Lily anytime soon. I'm not letting you confuse my daughter by walking in and out of our lives." I stared at the screen. My chest tightened. Lily was 5 years old, with bright eyes and a laugh that filled a room. I loved that little girl fiercely. Sarah knew this. She was using her own child as leverage, betting that my love for my granddaughter would override my need for self-respect. Years ago, I would have caved immediately. I would have driven back to that house, apologized for overreacting, and moved my bed into the cold basement just to read Lily a bedtime story. But I looked around my quiet, safe apartment. I thought about the boxes on the driveway. I typed my reply slowly, making sure every word was precise. I love Lily very much, and my door is always open to her. If you choose to keep her away from her grandmother out of spite, that is your decision to live with, not mine. I will not be manipulated. Have a good evening. I hit send. I put the phone on silent and placed it in a drawer in the kitchen. I walked into my living room, grabbed my watering can, and tended to the small potted ferns by the window. I refused to spend the evening agonizing over her threat. I knew Sarah. She was impulsive, but she was also deeply dependent on convenience. Keeping Lily away meant she had to do all the parenting herself, full-time, without a break. I went to bed that night feeling a strange mixture of sorrow and profound strength. I had called her bluff. Now all I had to do was wait, hold my ground, and continue building the life I had carved out for myself. A week passed in total silence. I spent my days volunteering at the local library, taking long walks in the nearby park, and reading books I had meant to open for years. The peace was unbroken. On Tuesday morning, I drove to the large supermarket across town to buy some specialty tea. I was pushing my cart toward the checkout when I turned the corner of the cereal aisle and nearly bumped into Greg. He looked awful. There were dark circles under his eyes, his shirt was wrinkled, and he had a fussy Lily sitting in the shopping cart seat. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me. "Valerie," he blurted out, looking cornered. I stopped my cart. "Hello, Greg." "Hi, sweetheart," I added, smiling softly at Lily, who waved a chubby hand at me. "It's been really hard this week," Greg muttered, glancing down at his cart, which held mostly frozen dinners and boxed mac and cheese. "Sarah is exhausted. We had to pay for extra daycare hours." He was waiting for me to step in to offer a check or to suggest I come over to help. He looked like a man who fully expected the safety net to magically reappear beneath him. I imagine balancing everything without help is quite an adjustment, I replied smoothly. I didn't offer a single dollar or an hour of my time. He frowned, shifting his weight. "You know, if you just apologized to Sarah, we could move past this. We could clear out a space downstairs." I looked at him, truly seeing him for the weak, entitled man he was. "I have a beautiful apartment, Greg." "I don't belong in a basement," I said, keeping my voice pleasant. "Give Sarah my regards." I pushed my cart past him, heading toward the cashier. I paid for my tea, walked out into the bright morning sunshine, and felt a massive weight lift entirely off my shoulders. He had nothing over me anymore. A month later, the autumn leaves were turning gold and red outside my apartment window. My new routine was firmly established. I joined a morning walking group, started a small balcony garden, and managed my finances with ease. The money I used to spend on Greg's gas and Sarah's internet was now building my savings back up. I was sitting at my table drinking coffee when my phone lit up. It was Sarah. I answered on the third ring. "Hello, Sarah." "Hi, Mom," she said. Her voice was entirely different, quiet, subdued, lacking the sharp edge of entitlement. "How have you been?" "I've been very well." "How is Lily?" "She's good. She misses you." Sarah paused, taking a shaky breath. "Mom, Greg's parents are out of town, and my regular sitter canceled. I have a really important work meeting this afternoon. Is there any way you could watch Lily for a few hours?" It wasn't a genuine apology for the boxes, but it was a surrender. She was finally asking, not demanding. I looked at my calendar on the fridge. It was blank for the afternoon. I missed my granddaughter terribly, but I knew that if I rushed over to her house, the old dynamics would try to pull me back in. "I would love to see Lily," I answered carefully. You can drop her off at my apartment at 1 o'clock and pick her up by 5. Your apartment? Sarah hesitated. Can't you come here? It's just easier with all her toys. No, I stated firmly, offering no further explanation. The boundary was set in stone. There was a brief silence. Okay. Sarah finally agreed. Text me the address. We'll be there at 1. I'll see you then, I said, and hung up. I smiled, picking up my coffee cup. I had lost a house, but I had gained a home. And the best part was, I held the only key. If there's one thing we can all take away from Valerie's journey, it's that true strength doesn't always have to roar. Sometimes it's just the quiet sound of a car engine starting or a door closing behind you. We spend so much of our lives trying to explain our boundaries, arguing our worth to people who are committed to taking us for granted. But Valerie showed us that boundaries aren't about punishing someone else. They are simply about protecting your own peace. She didn't need to yell, and she didn't need to fight. She just needed to remember that she held the key to her own life all along. If you've ever had to quietly pack up your own boxes and walk away from a situation that no longer respected you, I would love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. You are definitely not alone. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really helps the channel grow and pushes these stories out to other women who might need a little courage today. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.